Hey, everybody, thank you for joining today. Welcome to the show. I still don't have a name for this show exactly, but I am bringing on refreshed guests, which is really exciting. Mukul Jain is with us today, and he and I met each other about a year and a half or so ago. We met at an AI event in San Francisco and hit it off. I really was enjoying the questions he was asking in the session and thought it was very thoughtful. And so we met each other, and we've stayed in touch since and had a lot of thoughtful conversations since then. But today, what we're going to be talking about in particular is sales and sales leadership. So actually, before we get into that, I'll just give you a second to as a description for yourself. Head of revenue. What are you working on these days?
Yeah, so I'm actually, no, thanks, Brian, and thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. And I know we've been in touch for the last year and a half, really, talking every so often, and I love our conversation. So right now, I'm kind of doing a head of revenue consulting with startup companies that are typically very early stage and really trying to understand how, what are the roadblocks and how to get them to starting to think about revenue, to getting to revenue, and even get that first or second series fundings.
Series fundings. Okay, so that's going to lead us right into our first question then, because a lot of what we've been talking about recently is change, rate of change, and as a result, particularly thinking about VC-backed companies, the expectations of speed of revenue and volume of revenue and hockey stick style of revenue. As you're thinking about your ability to deliver to those expectations, how are you leading teams? How are you thinking about guiding CEOs in this paradigm of rapid change and high level expectations?
Yeah, I think it's almost a two or three pronged approach, right? You have to look at the product, but you have to also see what kind of resources, what kind of software development resources are they using and open to use. So I think from a two pronged approach, that's how I look at it. I also look at another aspect as to where are they in the product market fit. It's about are they thinking about how they fit in the market and an ICP standpoint? Are they still in development and they need to understand from a beta customer standpoint? So it's really where they are in their journey that we with is the starting point. Yeah.
And do you find, though, that from your perspective, the CEO's perspective, that it matches with the perspective of the VC firms? And I think that's probably the biggest question is are the expectations being properly set from those who are providing funding with the realities of resources, product market fit, and some of the more basic components of business?
Yeah, I think from a VC perspective, I don't try to delve too far into that. I try to understand where the CEO is from that perspective, but from the VC perspective, or I would say where they are is really kind of the angel perspective. And they're trying to understand what it is to get to the next step, start meeting with angels that feel they need to hit a certain target. And usually it's in singular metrics, and what I mean by that is it's either users or it's a level of revenue, but they're never talking about it as a holistic comprehensive.
And what does that mean then? So speaking of holistically, so
Yeah.
I'm coming from the customer success side, so I really love the post-sale, how post-sale insights, customer insights can feed back to sales, to marketing, to product. And I see it is that way. Is that how you're describing it as well, thinking about kind of the whole customer journey when you think about things holistically?
Yeah. So more of, how does usership play into top of funnel? How does that top of funnel become a journey for the prospect into a customer? And, is that going to be a sales pipeline? Are we doing outbound? Are we, so not just user from a metric standpoint that the angel wants to see them hit a certain critical mass of users. It's more like, okay, what is that user's journey with the product and with the company to the point of customer success? And so are you getting usership to hit the target and you just want to be able to market that, hey, we have 10,000 users using it? Or are you working towards a customer profile and a portfolio to be able to test product market fit and see what else other kind of development you need to be able to not just bring the revenue, but kind of work towards market share?
Work towards market share. Where does margin fit in? So I'm actually really curious about that, thinking through from a holistic perspective. If companies are trying to either secure their Series A or find their way then to Series B and onto Series C, one of the key pieces that I hear a lot about is retention and gross revenue retention, net revenue retention, and how those can be really important factors to show those who are bringing their checks that you do have good product market fit and you can hold on to and grow customers without huge top of funnel requirements. Where does margin fit into your perspective then? Is that required in these early stage companies?
Yeah, margin is, I mean, I think it's something that's always looked at. You definitely want to see a level of profitability, but I think it's a less of a requirement as long as you're keeping your burn rate low. And I think it's always important to understand what that burn rate is and then also put some emphasis on that. From the margin standpoint, it's only if you're way off margin, but I think that's a little bit too early of a metric to decide when you're dealing with an early stage. I do think it does, again, if it goes to burn rate and it's going to really exacerbate that rate, then yes, it must be looked at. I think in the beginning, it's really about building awareness and being able to increase that top of funnel and understand the conversion into the pipeline. And that's really how I look at it from what we were talking about, a holistic standpoint.
Okay, and then thinking through like your experience in this space, how it has changed over the last few years. As I said, like leading into this, change is rapid right now. The acceleration of change is pretty intense. How do you see yourself, and maybe as a proxy for the larger group of sales leaders, the appetite and the desire to be in this type of environment, which is very demanding. I can, again, coming from the CS side, I can always appreciate the demands of sales and sales leaders, knowing that it is, yes, it's high risk, high reward, but there's also just, high levels of scrutiny and microscopes on sales as well. Do you feel like that's changing at all in today's environment?
Yeah, I think it is. Well, I think it's always changing, but I think the culmination of the last 10 years is we're seeing a shift, right? We're seeing this cusp of a shift and an already shift. So, and let me unpack that a bit. So, what I've seen in the last 5 to 10 years is a level of product acumen and technical acumen that's almost now required of salespeople and sales leaders, right? So you can't just come in and think about how you're going to get a group of people that know how to talk to people. It's more than that. It's how are you going to be talking about product? How are you going to be understanding the knowledge? And how are you going to convey that, right? And that it's been, as we're in this technological renaissance with Silicon Valley, it's this is becoming an increasing importance and almost a requirement to be able to be part of. And so I do see that shift already there and those expectations already there. And sometimes that's what leads to some really aggressive targets.
Mm.
I think what I'm seeing as far as a cusp of change, which I was mentioning a little bit before, and happy to unpack that too, but I'll pass it over to you at this point, is that the cusp of change is really around how leaders and I think the sales department is looked at by the rest of the company and other actors involved, such as investors and even founders. If you're looking them as a separate from the company before they start a company to after they start the company, and what those expectations are.
Well, yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more. I think that's a really interesting point. So, how do you find that people are viewing your work or sales leadership work in more general terms? Has that evolved as well over the last decade or over the last year? Certainly, the technical piece. And we talked a bit about this offline, is the need for sales engineers and how they can play a part in a sale. The more that it's AE salespeople are technically capable to not only just demo the product, but to get in there and show how it can be impactful for a company's business. That's really, I think, a big change. But yeah, that last point that you were making, I think, is really interesting. How are sales leaders being viewed in today's market with these high levels of expectations?
Yeah, and it's a really good question, and I'll tell you, Brian, and you're not new to that of asking loaded questions, but it is a loaded question. But to try to keep it brief and conversational, I'll say that there are high expectations, and I would say that there are a lot of leaders that find it very difficult to control the revenue and control how to get people to meet those large expectations. That I've seen a number of divergence happen. And when I say divergence, it's not just one or two paths, but everyone's kind of taking a different approach to this. So I've seen some leaders go back into industry and they themselves become an account executive saying that, I don't have any control over this. So I only have control over myself. So I'm going to
Mm.
go out and I'm going to go and just make the business myself and let
Hmm.
somebody else deal with that. And we'll let some other management deal with it. And I've also seen some companies move away from a altogether sales leadership and have maybe like an operations or a chief operations or something, somebody else come in and step in and kind of take care of it. We were talking about earlier the offline about maybe even other functions in the company. They knew, as you were alluding to as well, sales engineers, or even there was an article about a head of engineering taking on a role. And I would like to delve into that further, but so you're seeing a lot of different ways of handling it. I feel that it kind of stemmed from a point where it was happening in the beginning and sales leaders were starting to scapegoat some of the people on their team, and that led to a breakdown in the sales department where now salespeople, that it became a usual trend that salespeople were going to be blamed for not hitting their number, get axed. Okay, the problem is abated. Now we just need to hire some more people. And the problem didn't get solved. And so this became an ongoing problem. And now leaders are coming under the axe and the expectations for aggressive targets. And so I think hopefully with this sales disruption, and I'll hand it over to you after this, is that this sales disruption will do the same thing in what happened with IT disruption, is that it unified the department. And I'm hoping that sales disruption somehow unifies the sales department.
That's a great vision, I think. If there's a known issue around ownership of revenue, the ability to control what one person can do to drive revenue, and the constant pressure on sales leaders to drive revenue, but the ability then to hit pause or say, as we were going to wrap this up, maybe going back to what some of the things you said earlier. Do we have proper product market fit? Do we have the right resourcing in place? Do we have the right people, process, and technology to sell this tool? And if not, you can't just blame one department or one head or one group. It has to be a holistic view at this. And I would hope that the people writing the checks, the angels, as you were talking about earlier, the venture capital funds, would recognize that. And I think they do. In my experience working with a lot of VCs, there is both certainly a drive to, we've given you a check, we want to see a return on that check, but they do understand business principles as well. And so I think then the last question I'd love to ask you is how you think about either the consulting work that you do or how you advise other head of revenue. What type of opportunities are people looking for now that are really good fits for the type of person that is focused on this holistic view? Is it these hockey stick style companies that are kind of churn and burn, or is it a longer term burn that's more sustainable? I'm curious what type of opportunities you're looking for or how you advise people to find things that match for them.
Yeah, yeah. So again, another loaded question, but I'll say this, that it's a great question, and I think that's where we are today, right now, is how do we proceed forward, right? So, a couple of things that I do when I even hear of somebody that wants to sell me a software that can help me produce, like replace some functionality of an SDR or altogether. I ask them one question: how do I train my SDRs to become better account executives? And so I feel it's up to me as a leader and somebody who wants to stay. I feel it's important for me to stay in the management and leadership role so that I can make sure that this role is taken care of with that responsibility, that we need to take care of the rest of the department, and we need to make sure that we build the department from the ground up as a unified group,
Mm.
and as a profession. So, I don't believe that SDRs should be replaced. We're going to get the short-term value instead of the long-term growth. We're going to have a vacuum of potential AEs as a result.
Mm.
And I've seen SDRs that are not the best, but they make excellent managers, and they make frontline managers, and they make excellent AEs.
Mm.
And that leads to them becoming excellent leaders. And so because of the short-term value and the aggressive expectations, we're cutting our own feet, right? So I
Mm.
want to make sure that that doesn't happen, and that we use AI to enhance our move forward. There was an article that I read that you sent me, and I really liked it. Actually, was about how like a head of engineering, closed a $4 million deal. But even in an article like that, you have that sounded like it was an inbound. The
Mm.
customer already understood the product really well, so they didn't need somebody to tell them. But who's going to go after the business
Yeah.
and the outbound business when now your target is 5x what you did before? So
Right.
if it's going to be the head of engineering, fine. But the head of engineering will find that he or she will have to go out and start prospecting that business. So if the
Yeah.
head of engineering is doing that, who's designing the platform? So that head of engineering now becomes the salesperson, and somebody else has to be the head of engineering, or
That's
that
right.
becomes the head of sales. And so that's how I really think of it going forward, is that, okay, fine, you're right, sales is changing and the face of
Yeah.
it is changing. But we
Yeah.
need to get into this aspect of, okay, that might change how salespeople must act, but we still need salespeople.
I like that. Oh, what a great place to wrap up. This was exciting as always chatting with you. So we talked through kind of the nuts and bolts of how to operate, and then we got into some of the more meaty pieces that are personal to you, which I really appreciated. So thank you for the insights. Thank you for your perspective. I always learn a lot when we chat. So now we get to share this with more people who are able to
Yeah,
watch.
that's excellent. I'm actually really excited to see how this might bring about a different conversation or other talk tracks from here. So Brian, thank you for having me, and thanks for doing this, and thanks for I got to thank you for thinking of doing this kind of show where you're getting to some harder issues in the business, right, and bringing them to light. I mean, that in itself takes a discipline and a great execution. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much. It is very much my pleasure. So with that, we'll let you jump off. Where can folks find you if they have more questions about sales, about revenue leadership, about you in particular?
I live on LinkedIn. So I'm always available there and happy to have a conversation. Feel free to message me. If you do connect, do send me a note first, and happy to take it from there.
All right, sounds great, man. Thank you so much for joining today. We'll have a great afternoon, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Happy holidays.
All right, take care.